Hiya Sean, thanks for sending the video through. Hope you're having some fun, getting some practice and hopefully getting out there in the sunshine that we can see clearly in that video and getting some swings there to try and get us back into full swing once the lockdown stops. Just a couple of things to run through now. Now obviously it's a bit tricky based on this camera angle. Obviously with the phone being on the floor down here, it does give the impression potentially that your arms are working a little bit too high. Now I'm going to go through that in a second to explain that, but if we can, I know it's not always as easy to possibly do this, ideally speaking from down the line view, you've got the line in terms of in line with your hands, but you ideally want it kind of level with your hands on your hips. If it's a little bit too low, it sometimes gives a little bit of a false impression of what you're doing, but based off what we can see, I'm going to go through what we want to try and work on. Now, posture for me is very, very good. Arms hanging down very nicely. Good sort of flex in the knees and a general sort of relaxed and balanced position there to start with. All very, very good. Now, as the club goes back in this position here, the perception, it seems to me, that club's going a little bit outside the hands. Ideally speaking at this point, I like the fact the club is pointing to the ground. That's really good. But it just seems to me a little bit outside too much. A bit too manipulated. Ideally speaking, we'd want that club to be a little bit more in kind of this position, facing back towards the camera. As a result of that, as that club then starts going back up, you can see now your arms going very, very high. And ideally speaking, we'd want your arm to be a bit more across your shoulder. Now, obviously, if the camera is down this low looking upwards, it will give that impression your left arm is high. But even based off that, I think that left arm for me is a little bit higher than we ideally want. So we can just try and get that sensation that the arms are working a little bit more around and underneath kind of your sort of, we call a swing plane line here. So you're swinging underneath that with the arms rather than going so abruptly up, both with the club, your hands there, and then obviously your arms that follow suit. Because of that then, now your arms being quite steep in the backswing. As you start coming down, we can see the golf club now going to be coming down quite steep. Now I like the fact your arms are kind of dropping in this position, but we want to try and get that sensation, that club. Now if we're doing it this slow, that the arm, that club should be just falling back a little bit more back behind us. Ideally speaking at this position, if the ball was roughly, I've got a little spot roughly, I think it was about there where your club was setting up. Yep. The ball is roughly about, as we get your hands down to kind of sort of mid-drift position, you'd be wanting to see the club shaft a little bit more on the red line as opposed to that green line. Otherwise, you're going to be coming down a bit too steep and across the golf ball, and that's going to create kind of a slice spin or a sort of toey contact. So a couple of things there to try and focus on. I think we did that stuff with the session previously with the wall. Now, I wouldn't recommend using this wall because it looks a bit sort of rough and jagged, unless you've got an old club you don't mind scraping against the wall. But the drill we were practicing there with that downswing, as you get to about here in the backswing, if that arm is a little bit lower, more in sort of this position as opposed to on that red line, when the hands start working down, which they do nicely, the club now is going to work a little bit more kind of behind you and around. That's going to give you just a more efficient angle for the club to travel more this way into the golf ball, as opposed to being out to in. So a couple of things there to summarise. Setup, excellent as always. Taking the golf club weight a little bit, for me, too far outside. Like I said, the camera angle might give that impression. But even based on this, where the camera is, I think that's still a little bit too far outside. I like the club face now being nice and toe down. So that's great. You've been working on that. And then again, at the top of the back, so the left arm just a little bit too high. Again, based on the fact you're going a little bit outside, it'd be very unnatural to be here and then take your left arm really across your shoulders. So if we can get your left arm working a bit more this way on the way back, club working more around your body, slightly flatter, and then when the arms start working down now, that club can just tip a little bit more behind us. So I hope that all makes sense. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. I could always try and send you a video myself and try to show you what I think I want you to try and to work on. If that doesn't make sense in what we just discussed there or what I just mentioned there, then feel free to ask. I've got plenty of time on my hands at the moment, as you can imagine. So yeah, so feel free to send it through. And if you want to send through sort of after videos to see how the practice is coming on, again, feel free to do that. So hope you're keeping well then, Sean, and I will catch up with you soon. Cheers.